The year 1326 witnessed the birth of a boy who would reshape the destiny of empires. In the fortified palace of Bursa, the newly established capital of the expanding Ottoman Principality, Murad arrived in a world where survival itself was a daily negotiation with fate. His father, Orhan Gazi, the second ruler of the Ottoman dynasty, stood at the threshold of his chamber as midwives announced the arrival of his son, unaware that this infant would one day elevate their modest Beylik into an empire that would dominate 3 continents. The baby's cries echoed through stone corridors where Byzantine craftsmen had labored only decades before, a poignant reminder of conquered civilizations and those yet to fall. Murad's childhood unfolded against the backdrop of relentless expansion. Orhan Gazi was not merely a father, but a warrior statesman whose every decision carved new territories from the crumbling Byzantine Empire. The young prince observed his father's court, where Turkish warriors mingled with Greek administrators, where Islamic scholars debated theology with Christian priests under the pragmatic tolerance that would become an Ottoman hallmark. According to historical accounts referenced in the Ottoman Empire, A Short History by Soraya Faruqi, this multicultural environment profoundly shaped Murad's later governance philosophy, teaching him that empires were built not just through conquest, but through the intelligent integration of diverse peoples. By the time Murad reached his 10th year in 1336, he had already witnessed the fall of Nicomedia, the ancient Byzantine city that became Ottoman Izmit. His father's military campaigns were his classroom, and the lessons were written in the movement of armies, the psychology of siege warfare, and the delicate diplomacy required to maintain alliances with neighboring Turkish beyliks while simultaneously absorbing them. The boy learned to ride before most children could properly walk, to draw a bow before he could read complex texts, and to understand tactical formations before he mastered poetry, though he would eventually excel at both. The young prince's education was entrusted to both Muslim scholars and captured Byzantine intellectuals, a deliberate choice by Orhan Gazi that reflected Ottoman pragmatism. Murad studied the Quran and Islamic jurisprudence alongside Greek philosophy and military history. He learned Persian and Arabic in addition to his native Turkish, and surprisingly, acquired functional knowledge of Greek and Serbian, languages that would prove invaluable in his future diplomatic endeavors. His tutors recognized in him an unusual combination of martial prowess and intellectual curiosity, a mind that could appreciate the elegance of a well-executed flanking maneuver as much as the subtlety of a diplomatic agreement. The political landscape of Anatolia in the 13th century was a chessboard of competing powers. The Byzantine Empire, though diminished, still controlled Constantinople and significant territories in Thrace and Greece. The Seljuk Sultanate of Rum had fractured into numerous beyliks, each ruled by ambitious Turkish chieftains. To the east, the Ilkhanate was dissolving into chaos, while to the west, the Servian Empire under Stefan Dušan was reaching its zenith. Murad absorbed these geopolitical realities, understanding that his family's survival depended on navigating this treacherous environment with both military strength and political acumen. 1346 marked a watershed in Murad's education when Orhan Gazi, now in his 60s, began delegating military commands to his eldest son. At 20 years old, Murad was entrusted with his first independent campaign, a punitive expedition against Byzantine fortresses in the Marmara region that had been raiding Ottoman territories. The young commander departed Bursa with 3,000 cavalry and infantry, knowing that his father's eyes, along with those of skeptical tribal leaders, would scrutinize his every decision. Success would cement his position as heir apparent. Failure would embolden rivals within the Ottoman family who questioned whether the scholarly warrior possessed the ruthlessness necessary for leadership. The campaign revealed Murad's emerging military genius. Rather than launching costly frontal assaults on fortified positions, he implemented a strategy of systematic isolation, cutting supply lines and bribing local administrators to surrender without bloodshed. Within 6 months, he had secured 4 strategic fortresses, losing fewer than 100 men in the process. His approach combined his father's pragmatism with innovations drawn from his study of Mongol and Byzantine military treatises. The warriors who returned to Bursa brought tales not of reckless courage but of calculated brilliance, of a commander who valued his soldiers' lives while achieving comprehensive victory. But Murad's apprenticeship extended beyond battlefields. In 1349, a succession crisis erupted in the neighboring Karasi Beylik when its ruler died without clear heirs. Multiple claimants emerged, each seeking Ottoman support or fearing Ottoman intervention. Orhan Gazi dispatched Murad to resolve the situation, a test of diplomatic skill more challenging than any military campaign. The young prince spent 3 months in negotiations, navigating tribal politics, religious sensitivities, and competing economic interests. His solution was characteristically pragmatic. He arranged for the peaceful annexation of Karachi territories into the Ottoman realm while guaranteeing positions of honor and influence to the former ruling family, transforming potential enemies into invested stakeholders. These years also brought personal milestones that would shape Murad's character. In 1350, at 24, he married Gusia Hatun, daughter of a prominent Turkish tribal leader, a union that solidified critical alliances within Anatolia. Their relationship transcended political necessity. Historical accounts suggest genuine affection between the couple, and Gulsi proved to be a trusted advisor whose counsel Murad would seek throughout his reign. The following year brought the birth of his first son Bayezid, an event that secured the Ottoman succession and intensified Murad's sense of dynastic responsibility. The 1350s witnessed accelerating Byzantine decline, creating opportunities and challenges for the expanding Ottoman state. Constantinople, isolated and impoverished, could no longer effectively govern its remaining Balkan territories. Serbian and Bulgarian kingdoms competed for Byzantine possessions while battling each other, creating a power vacuum that would draw Ottoman attention westward across the Dardanelles. Murad recognized before most that the future of the Ottoman dynasty lay not in further Anatolian conquests but in the rich, fragmented lands of Europe. Orhan Ghazi's health began deteriorating in 1357, forcing Murad to assume greater administrative responsibilities. He effectively governed the Ottoman realm while his father retained the title, a transitional arrangement that allowed for smooth succession preparation. Murad reformed tax collection systems, established more formal military recruitment procedures, and initiated diplomatic contacts with Italian maritime republics whose commercial interests aligned with Ottoman expansion. These administrative achievements, less celebrated than military victories, laid the foundations for the bureaucratic structures that would sustain the Ottoman Empire for centuries. The question of succession, however, remained complicated by Ottoman tradition, which recognized no automatic primogeniture. Murad had brothers, and by Turkish custom, any son of the ruling family could theoretically claim leadership. This reality forced Murad to continuously demonstrate his superior capabilities while carefully maintaining family harmony, a political tightrope that would influence his own succession policies decades later. The spring of 1362 arrived with the kind of clarity that seems reserved for moments of historical transformation. Orhan Ghazi, having ruled the Ottoman Beylik for 36 years and expanded it from a modest frontier principality into a formidable regional power, succumbed to illness in his palace at Bursa. He was approximately 71 years old, an exceptional age for that era, and his passing marked not just the end of a reign but the conclusion of the Ottoman dynasty's foundational phase. Murad, now 36, assumed leadership at the moment when the state his grandfather Osman had founded and his father had consolidated stood ready for its metamorphosis into an empire. The succession occurred with minimal disruption, a testament to Murad's careful political preparation during his father's final years. The tribal leaders, religious authorities, and military commanders who comprised the Ottoman power structure had already accepted Murad's preeminence. His brothers, having witnessed his military successes and administrative competence, offered no challenge. Yet this peaceful transition was itself revolutionary, for Murad chose not to follow the brutal precedent being established in other Turkish Beyliks, where new rulers routinely executed their siblings to prevent succession conflicts. This decision, motivated by both personal ethics and political calculation, would have profound consequences for Ottoman succession practices in subsequent generations. Murad's first acts as ruler revealed his strategic priorities. While tradition demanded he focus on consolidating Anatolian territories, Murad looked westward with uncommon vision. The Byzantine Empire's European territories presented opportunities that transcended mere territorial expansion. They offered access to wealthier economies, more productive agricultural lands, and a pathway into the heart of Christian Europe. In 1362, Byzantine control over Thrace was nominal at best, with local Greek aristocrats exercising practical independence while Serbian and Bulgarian kingdoms competed for dominance in the broader Balkans. The new Sultan initiated his European strategy by securing a foothold across the Dardanelles. Through a combination of military pressure and diplomatic engagement, he obtained permission from Byzantine Emperor John V Palaiologos to establish a permanent Ottoman presence at Gallipoli. This arrangement, formalized in 1363, was presented as a mercenary agreement wherein Ottoman forces would assist Constantinople against Balkan threats. In reality, it provided Murad with a strategic bridgehead into Europe that would prove irreversible. The fortification of Gallipoli under Ottoman control represented a watershed moment that contemporaries failed to fully appreciate, but which historians would recognize as the beginning of Ottoman Europe. Murad's expansion into Thrace commenced in 1363 with methodical precision. unlike raids conducted by other Turkish warlords seeking plunder. Murad's campaigns aimed at permanent occupation and systematic administration. He captured Adrianople, the second most important Byzantine city after Constantinople itself, in 1369 after a prolonged siege. The city's fall sent shockwaves through Christian Europe, for Adrianople was not a frontier outpost, but a major urban center with deep historical significance. Murad immediately renamed it Edirne and began its transformation into his western capital, a decision that symbolized the permanence of Ottoman presence in Europe. The Sultan's treatment of conquered populations demonstrated the pragmatic tolerance that would characterize Ottoman governance for centuries. Rather than imposing harsh religious conversion or engaging in wholesale population displacement, Murad allowed Christian communities to maintain their churches, property, and local governance structures in exchange for loyalty and tax payments. This approach, influenced by Islamic legal traditions regarding protected religious minorities and informed by Murad's multicultural upbringing, proved remarkably effective at pacifying newly conquered territories while maintaining economic productivity. Murad's domestic policies during these years focused on institutionalizing the Ottoman state. He expanded the Janissary Corps, an elite infantry unit composed of converted Christian youths trained from childhood in Ottoman military methods and loyal directly to the Sultan. This institution, controversial for separating children from their families, created a military force unencumbered by tribal loyalties that had constrained previous Turkish rulers. He also formalized the administrative division of territories into provinces governed by appointed officials rather than hereditary local rulers, gradually transforming the Ottoman realm from a loose confederation into a centralized state. 1371 witnessed Murad's most significant military confrontation to date, when Serbian and Hungarian forces, alarmed by rapid Ottoman expansion into the Balkans, formed a coalition to expel the Turks from Europe. The opposing army, led by Serbian King Vukašin and his brother Despot Obliše, mustered approximately 50,000 warriors, outnumbering Murad's available forces. The confrontation occurred along the Maritsa River in September, and the outcome would determine whether the Ottoman European venture would survive or perish. Murad, demonstrating the tactical brilliance that would define his military legacy, refused conventional battle and instead launched a nighttime assault on the enemy camp, creating panic and chaos that led to catastrophic coalition losses as thousands drowned attempting to cross the river in darkness. The Battle of Maritsa, as it became known in historical records, fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Balkans. Serbian military capacity was devastated, with both Vukašin and Ogliše perishing in the disaster. The victory opened Macedonia and much of Serbia to Ottoman expansion and established Murad's reputation as a military genius, whose unconventional tactics could overcome numerical disadvantage. More significantly, it demonstrated to Balkan Christian states that Ottoman presence in Europe was not a temporary incursion, but a permanent geopolitical reality, requiring accommodation rather than resistance. Following his Maritsa triumph, Murad implemented a sophisticated diplomatic strategy toward Balkan Christian states. Rather than attempting immediate comprehensive conquest, which would have overstretched Ottoman resources and united Christian resistance, he established a system of vassal relationships. Serbian, Bulgarian, and Byzantine lords maintained their territories and titles in exchange for military support, annual tribute, and recognition of Ottoman suzerainty. This arrangement provided Murad with additional military manpower for campaigns while allowing Christian rulers to preserve their positions. A pragmatic compromise that facilitated Ottoman expansion with minimal resistance. The Sultan's attention also remained focused on Anatolian affairs, where competing Turkish beyliks still posed potential threats to Ottoman security. Throughout the 1370s, Murad conducted campaigns that gradually absorbed neighboring territories through a combination of military pressure and diplomatic marriages that tied other Turkish dynasties to the Ottoman family. These eastern campaigns, though less celebrated than his European conquests, were essential for securing the Ottoman base in Anatolia and preventing rival Turkish powers from exploiting his European preoccupations. Edirne's transformation into a major Ottoman center accelerated during this period. Murad invested heavily in the city's infrastructure, constructing mosques, markets, administrative buildings, and fortifications that would serve as the template for Ottoman urban development throughout the empire. He relocated significant portions of his administration to Edirne, making it effectively his primary capital, while Bursa retained symbolic importance as the dynasty's ancestral seat. This westward shift of Ottoman administrative gravity reflected Murad's recognition that the empire's future centered on European territories rather than Anatolian expansion. The 1370s also brought religious and cultural developments that shaped Ottoman identity. Murad patronized Sufi orders whose mystical Islamic traditions resonated with both Turkish warriors and converted Christian populations. He commissioned translations of Arabic and Persian texts into Turkish, promoting Turkish as a literary and administrative language rather than merely a spoken vernacular. His court attracted scholars, poets, and theologians from across the Islamic world, transforming the Ottoman realm from a frontier military society into a center of Islamic culture and learning. Personal tragedy marked 1377 when Gulsi Hakan died after a prolonged illness. Her death deeply affected Murad, who, despite his additional marriage, is maintained special reverence for his first wife. Their sons, Bayezid and Yaqub, had grown into capable young men who commanded military forces and administered provinces, ensuring dynastic continuity while their father continued his imperial projects. The Sultan's relationship with his sons combined affection with the pragmatic awareness that Ottoman succession traditions meant only one could ultimately rule, a tension that would shadow his later years. June 15 of 1389 dawned clear over the plains of Kosovo, where two armies prepared for a confrontation that would resonate through Balkan history for centuries. Sultan Murad I, now 63 years old but still personally commanding his forces, faced a coalition of Serbian, Bosnian, Hungarian, and Albanian warriors led by Serbian Prince Lazar Hriblajanović. The battle represented not merely a territorial dispute, but a civilizational confrontation, with Christian Europe making its most serious attempt to reverse Ottoman expansion into the Balkans. Both sides understood that the outcome would determine whether the Ottoman presence in Europe would contract or become irreversible. The Ottoman army that assembled at Kosovo Polje reflected Murad's decades of military innovation. His forces numbered approximately 30,000 to 40,000 warriors, composed of traditional Turkish cavalry, the elite Janissary Infantry Corps, and contingents provided by Christian vassal states, including Serbian nobles who had accepted Ottoman suzerainty. This multicultural, multi-religious composition scandalized European observers who expected clear religious divisions in warfare. But it exemplified Ottoman pragmatism and the Sultan's success in integrating conquered populations into his military system. Opposing them stood a slightly larger coalition force united by religious identity but fractured by competing Balkan political interests and uncertain command structures. Murad's tactical approach demonstrated the synthesis of Turkish, Mongol, and Byzantine military traditions he had studied throughout his life. He positioned his army in three divisions: Anatolian forces on the right wing under his son Bayezid, European troops and vassals on the left wing, and Janissaries and elite cavalry in the center, under his personal command. This formation allowed a flexible response to battlefield developments, while concentrating his most reliable units where they could deliver a decisive impact. As dawn broke and armies advanced, Murad reportedly dismounted from his horse and performed ritual prayers, a gesture that inspired his Muslim warriors while demonstrating the religious dimension he attached to the confrontation. The battle unfolded throughout June 15th with extraordinary violence and shifting momentum. Initial Serbian attacks achieved tactical success against Ottoman flanks, and for several hours the outcome remained uncertain. Prince Lazar's forces fought with desperate courage, knowing that defeat would mean the end of Serbian independence. However, Murad's center held firm, and his tactical reserves, deployed at critical moments, blunted Serbian advances. By afternoon, Bayezid's Anatolian cavalry executed a devastating flanking maneuver that broke Serbian lines, transforming stalemate into Ottoman victory. The battle became a slaughter as the defeated coalition forces attempted retreat across difficult terrain while pursued by Ottoman cavalry. The human cost was staggering on both sides. Prince Lazar was captured during the battle's final stages and executed, though accounts differ on whether this occurred on Murad's orders or during the chaos of victory. Thousands of warriors from both armies lay dead or dying on Kosovo's plains, and Ottoman casualties included numerous senior commanders whose loss would be felt in subsequent campaigns. Yet from the carnage emerged an unambiguous strategic outcome. Serbian military power was effectively destroyed, and Ottoman dominance of the Balkans was confirmed. Christian Europe, which had placed such hope in the coalition, now recognized that no foreseeable military alliance could expel the Ottomans from the European territories they occupied. Then occurred an event that would acquire legendary status in both Ottoman and Serbian historical traditions. As Sultan Murad toured the battlefield after victory, inspecting the dead and dying, a Serbian knight named Miloš Obilić, either genuinely wounded or feigning injury, approached the Sultan claiming to offer submission or provide important information. When permitted to approach, Miloš suddenly drew a concealed dagger and stabbed Murad, inflicting a mortal wound. Ottoman guards immediately killed the assassin, but the damage was done. The Sultan, who had transformed a modest beylik into an empire, who had brought Ottoman power into the heart of Europe, would not survive his greatest victory. Murad's death on the Kosovo battlefield shocked his army and empire. His son Bayezid, recognizing the potential for panic or succession crisis at this critical moment, immediately assumed command and, according to some accounts, ordered the execution of his brother Yaqub to prevent any challenge to his succession. This fratricide, whether it occurred at Kosovo or shortly after, established a brutal precedent that would plague Ottoman succession for centuries, ironically contradicting Murad's own earlier restraint toward his brothers. The army, despite mourning their sultan, maintained discipline and order, a testament to the institutional strength Murad had built into Ottoman military structures. The immediate aftermath of Kosovo and Murad's assassination demonstrated the solidity of the state he had built. Bayezid I, who would become known as Yenilium, or the Thunderbolt for his military speed, secured succession without significant opposition and continued his father's expansionist policies with even greater aggression. Murad's body was initially interred at Kosovo in a tomb that would become a site of pilgrimage for Ottoman Muslims, though it was later transferred to Bursa, where his father Orhan lay buried. The dual burial sites symbolize the geographic breadth of Ottoman power that Murad had created, spanning from Anatolia to the Balkans. Murad's 30-year reign from 1362 to 1389 fundamentally transformed both the Ottoman state and the broader geopolitical landscape of southeastern Europe and Anatolia. He inherited a beylik that controlled portions of northwestern Anatolia and a precarious foothold in Europe. He bequeathed his son an empire with secure Anatolian territories and dominance over much of the Balkans, including Thrace, Macedonia, Bulgaria, and Serbia. This expansion represented not merely territorial acquisition, but the creation of a genuinely transcontinental Islamic empire that would endure for over 4 centuries. The institutional innovations Murad implemented proved as significant as his territorial conquests. He transformed the Janissary Corps from a small elite unit into a substantial standing army that provided the Ottoman state with military capabilities superior to the feudal levies and mercenary forces employed by European kingdoms. This professional military institution, combined with his systematic provincial administration and his pragmatic approach to conquered Christian populations, created a state structure capable of governing diverse territories and peoples. These administrative innovations, rather than merely military conquest, explain the Ottoman Empire's longevity and its ability to maintain control over vast territories. Murad's religious and cultural policies established patterns that would characterize Ottoman governance for centuries. His pragmatic tolerance toward Christian populations in conquered territories, grounded in Islamic legal traditions regarding protected religious minorities, reduced resistance to Ottoman rule, and maintained economic productivity in newly acquired regions. This approach contrasted sharply with the religious warfare characterizing contemporary Christian-Muslim confrontations in Iberia, and would give the Ottoman Empire a distinct advantage in governing religiously diverse populations. His patronage of Islamic scholarship and Sufi mysticism also helped create a distinctive Ottoman Islamic culture that synthesized Turkish, Arabic, and Persian elements. Historical assessment of Murad I has evolved considerably over the centuries. Contemporary Christian chronicles portrayed him as a cruel tyrant and mortal enemy of Christendom, while Ottoman sources depicted him as a pious Muslim warrior spreading Islam through righteous conquest. Modern scholarship recognizes a more complex figure whose motivations combined religious conviction, dynastic ambition, military genius, and political pragmatism. He was neither the religious fanatic of Christian propaganda nor the flawless hero of Ottoman tradition, but rather a skilled statesman who understood power's realities and exercised it with considerable sophistication. The Battle of Kosovo and Murad's assassination acquired mythological dimensions in both Serbian and Ottoman historical traditions. For Serbs, Kosovo became a foundational national tragedy, a moment of heroic resistance against overwhelming odds that defined Serbian identity for centuries despite the battle's actual military outcome. Miloša Obilik's assassination of Murad became a symbol of sacrificial heroism, celebrated in epic poetry and folk songs that kept the memory alive across generations. For Ottomans, Kosovo represented a crucial victory that confirmed divine favor for their imperial project, while Murad's martyrdom on the battlefield elevated him to special status among Ottoman sultans. Comparing Murad to his predecessors and successors illuminates his historical significance. His grandfather, Osman Gazi, founded the Ottoman dynasty but governed only a small frontier principality. His father Orhan Gazi substantially expanded Ottoman territories and began the state-building process. Murad, however, transformed the Ottoman polity from a regional power into an empire with pretensions to universal Islamic leadership. His son, Bayezid I, would continue expansion but would also suffer catastrophic defeat at Tamerlane's hands in 1402, temporarily fragmenting the empire. Murad's reign thus appears in retrospect as the period when Ottoman power reached critical mass, becoming too substantial to be reversed or eliminated. Understanding Sultan Murad I requires looking beyond military campaigns and political achievements to examine the person who navigated decades of warfare, diplomacy, and governance. Contemporary accounts, though filtered through cultural biases and limited by historical distance, provide glimpses of his character. Ottoman sources describe him as personally pious, observing Islamic religious obligations with consistency unusual among warrior rulers of his era. He reportedly preferred simple living despite his power and wealth, maintaining modesty in personal habits while displaying appropriate magnificence in public ceremonies that reinforced his authority. Physical descriptions of Murad are sparse and often contradictory, as was typical for medieval historical writing that emphasized character over appearance. Some accounts describe him as tall and physically imposing, while others emphasize his intellectual bearing and penetrating gaze. What seems consistent across sources is recognition of his personal courage, his willingness to share battlefield dangers with his soldiers, and his capacity to inspire loyalty through personal example rather than merely through fear or reward. These qualities, combined with his tactical brilliance, explain how he commanded such devotion from forces composed of diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds. Murad's family relationships reveal complexity often obscured by his political and military legacy. His marriage to Gülsi Hatun appears to have been genuinely affectionate, unusual in an era when dynastic marriages were purely political arrangements. After her death, he contracted additional marriages that served diplomatic purposes, allying his dynasty with important Turkish, Greek, and Bulgarian families. His relationships with his sons combined paternal affection with political calculation, training them for leadership while remaining aware that Ottoman succession traditions created potential rivalries. The reported execution of his son Yakub by Bayezid immediately after Kosovo, whether Murad ordered it before his death or Bayezid acted independently, represents a tragic dimension of dynastic politics that Murad had tried to avoid, but which his reign's success ironically made inevitable. The Sultan's intellectual interests extended beyond military strategy into poetry, theology, and history. He patronized scholars who produced works on Islamic law, Sufi mysticism, and Turkish history that helped forge a distinctive Ottoman cultural identity. His court attracted intellectuals from across the Islamic world and even included some Christian scholars whose expertise he valued. This cultural patronage served political purposes by legitimizing Ottoman rule through intellectual and religious achievement, but it also reflected Murad's genuine intellectual curiosity and his recognition that empires required cultural as well as military foundations. Murad's approach to governance balanced authoritarian control with pragmatic delegation. He expected absolute loyalty and could be ruthless toward those who betrayed him. Yet he also empowered competent administrators and generals with considerable autonomy to govern provinces and conduct military campaigns. This combination of centralized strategic direction with decentralized operational execution allowed the Ottoman Empire to function effectively across vast distances with medieval communication technologies. The administrative systems he established proved sufficiently robust to survive succession crises and military defeats that would have destroyed less institutionalized states. Perhaps Murad's most significant personal quality was his strategic vision, his ability to perceive long-term geopolitical trends and position the Ottoman state to exploit them. His recognition that the empire's future lay in Europe rather than Anatolia contradicted the instincts of many Turkish warriors who viewed themselves primarily as Anatolian rulers. His understanding that Christian vassals could be integrated into Ottoman military and political structures rather than merely conquered and ruled challenged conventional wisdom about religious warfare. His investment in institutional development rather than merely personal military glory demonstrated unusual foresight for a medieval ruler whose legacy could have rested solely on battlefield victories. The historical trajectory Murad set for the Ottoman Empire extended far beyond his lifetime. His son Bayezid I would continue expansion until temporarily checked by Tamerlane. His great-grandson Mehmed II would complete the conquest of Constantinople in 1453, fulfilling an ambition that had driven Muslim rulers for centuries and establishing the Ottoman Empire as the preeminent power in the Eastern Mediterranean. Later sultans would extend Ottoman control across North Africa, the Middle East, and deep into Europe, creating an empire that at its height in the 16th and 17th centuries encompassed territories from Algeria to Iraq and from Hungary to Yemen. Yet all this imperial grandeur rested on foundations Murad had constructed during his 3 decades of rule. He transformed a modest frontier beylik into a transcontinental empire, established institutional structures that could govern diverse populations across vast territories, and created a military system that would dominate southeastern European warfare for centuries. He combined military genius with political sophistication, religious conviction with pragmatic tolerance, and personal courage with strategic vision in ways that placed him among the most consequential rulers in Islamic and world history. When Sultan Murad I died on Kosovo's battlefield in 1389, struck down at the moment of his greatest triumph, he left an empire that would continue expanding for another century and endure in various forms until the 20th century. The boy born in Bursa in 1326 had become the architect of an empire that would shape the history of Europe, Asia, and Africa for over 400 years. His story is one of vision realized through violence, of empire built through blood and calculation, of one man's extraordinary capacity to perceive historical possibilities and marshal the military, political, and administrative means to achieve them. In the long sweep of history, few rulers have so fundamentally altered the trajectory of civilizations as did Sultan Murad I, the third Ottoman ruler who transformed his family's frontier principality into an empire that would stand among the world's greatest powers.